Welcome to this brief tutorial for using support intensity scale data and looking at a few exploratory and other analyses that have been developed using this SIS data across the state of Michigan. My name is Josh Hagedorn. I'm from a firm called TBD Solutions, and we specialize in the use of data to inform behavioral health care, among other things. A couple of details to jump through just a second, just as an introduction to what we'll be talking about today. First off, this is an analysis. It's not a product. So while we will be showing some things that are sort of available on the web and that people can use to inform their decisions and their thinking about how best to serve and advocate for and help the population of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, this is not a product that we're trying to sell. It's actually being made available by the state as part of a contract that we have with them for sort of learning as a system how best to use this information. So it's not a product, it's actually open source, and if anybody else wanted to sort of add on to this from organizations who are using SIS data and trying to do their own analyses, we are more than welcome to have other people add parts and analyses on to this tool. And the more the merrier, really, because I think it's going to take a lot of people thinking through these issues to make sure that we're addressing people's needs using data in a way that's both thoughtful and really gets at the level of complexity that we need to tackle. So it's open source. And then also worth saying is that this is a single moment in time. Because it's not a product, we're really just saying, here is a set of analyses that have been done so far. As of March 16th, 2017, this is where we're at. But we're hoping that new questions and new people being involved and sort of bringing their own set of concerns and questions and creativity to the table will mean that this looks quite a bit different in a few months. So really, we're just looking at the initial set of analyses that have been developed with multiple stakeholders throughout the state in response to their questions. But this by no means should indicate that this is the end of things. If anything, this is very much the beginning of trying to understand the population of people who are receiving this assessment. So this was developed in response to people who are asking questions, and it will continue to be developed as long as people have questions and want to dig into the analysis. So second, probably worth giving a brief update. I'm going to assume that most people who are tuning into this have at least a basic knowledge of what the supports intensity scale is and what it includes. But as a brief reminder of the types of data that are housed in this assessment, I wanted to just run through these areas quickly just to remind folks what's in there so that you can be thinking about this as we walk through the different analyses that have been created so far. So there are a handful of basic overall areas in the SIS, and I've highlighted them up here. So medical supports and behavioral supports, otherwise known as Section 1 of the SIS, at least in its most recent version. Next, we have Section 2, which is home living, community living, lifelong learning, employment, health and safety, and social activities. So these highlighted items make up Section 2. And then last, we have protection and advocacy, which has its own section and can also be used can also be sort of brought into the analysis. Now, inside of each one of these sections are a number of specific questions. And each of those questions has a few different parts to it, at least for sections 2 and 3. So what we have listed down here below, just to give you a sense of how detailed this assessment is, we really have a list of all of these different areas that are assessed in each of these domains, right? So there's a question on learning with technology, on learning job skills, and we can see all of these as we scroll down. And you'll see as we go through the analyses that we've tried to find some ways to summarize the data, but also to allow people to access this really rich level of detail. And that's part of what we will be diving into. So let's get started. If you would like to follow along while you are listening to this and sort of, have on one part of your screen maybe this this tutorial, and then on another part just actually be looking at the application yourself, it is already available on the web at the web address that I just pulled up on the screen. So if you want to pause this a moment, copy this down, and paste it into your browser, you should be able to get to a view of exactly what we're going to be looking at in this tutorial, though maybe the data will be updated or there will be some new things, like I said, but most of this basic stuff that I'm talking about today is already in there. So let's get started. The first thing to note is probably that on this left-hand side we have a sidebar, and this is really how we navigate around to the different types of analysis that are available. We can look at, for instance, productivity, population summary, etc. And these are all different pages inside of different analyses that have been completed with this SIS data. Just below that list of pages, we have a couple of filters. And these filters, when you choose them, they apply to every other page that you go to, right? So if you pick a filter, it should stay picked for as long as you're sort of going around between one analysis and another. And the two filters here are region, right? And region is going to give you an option of the different prepaid inpatient health plans in the state of Michigan. So if I wanted to, select a specific one, it will then update the data based on your selection. Let's see, we'll do another one for fun. So it'll update the data based on your selection, and then you can also either include all of the CMH agencies inside of that region or select a specific CMH agency. So you can really filter the entire view of the data in this application by region or by a specific CMH. But to get started, we'll sort of undo those filters and move back out to the entire state's data. But again, if you want to follow along at home with one of those filters selected, go right ahead. So our first page that we have here is productivity. And by productivity here, we mean that it's the productivity of SIS assessors. As many of you probably know, there are, the SIS is being rolled out across the state of Michigan, and there was a 3-year time period given during which all of the individuals who are eligible to receive a SIS assessment received a SIS assessment. And that period for completing that initial SIS assessment on all eligible individuals ran from July of 2014 and then 3 years were given for completion. So that ran to July of 2017, and then recently that deadline was extended to the end of the fiscal year, the end of September of 2017. So, and you can see that entire scope of the project coming along right here on the right-hand side. And we'll get into how to interpret that graph in a moment. We'll start with just these simple bars over on the left-hand side. The first one up here is red. If it was 100% or greater, it would be green. And that is the completion rate. I'll explain the other ones, and I'll come back to this one because it sort of relies on a couple of other things to calculate it. The second number you'll see there, that 53.3%, that is the percentage of assessments that have been completed. So of all of the people who need to receive an assessment during this rollout period, 53.3% of them have received an assessment. And the number of assessments that have been completed on average per week so far is 166, though if you wanted to be on track to get them all done, we would have had to have done 220 assessments per week. That's what that bottom one shows. So let's hop back up here to our red friend up on top, this 68% completion rate. So if you're navigating this later and don't have this tutorial open, on most of the pages that we've created, we have little tabs that say about. You'll see one over here, you'll see one down here, and those should contain some decent explanations of what's being displayed in the data or in the visualizations on that page. So opening this one, we can see, well, here's a definition for completion rate. So completion rate is really made up of two numbers, and so a numerator and a denominator. And the first number, the numerator, is the percentage of assessments completed. So it's this number here is what's the numerator of the completion rate. The denominator is the percentage of time that has gone by between the start date of the project to complete SISs for the entire population and the end date of that project, which is September 30th, 2017. So let's say I had a completion percent, let's say I had 80% of my assessments complete. Well, that sounds like a pretty good number, right? So we're getting up there, we're getting close to the end. But if I have 80% of my assessments complete and I have 1 day until the deadline comes, then obviously I'm quite a bit behind. So what this completion rate number does is it's really telling us what percent, are we on track to meet our deadline for the completion of all SISs, and what is the percent of the rate that we would have to be doing them that we are currently doing them at. So currently, assessments are being done at only 68% of the rate that would be needed to complete them on time. If we look over at the chart on the right-hand side, this shows us in a little bit more detail what we're talking about. So along the bottom, we can see that we have the dates, and then along this y-axis on the side over here, this is measuring the cumulative number of SIS assessments. By cumulative, I mean that SIS assessments are not subtracted. This doesn't show a daily total of how many were completed that day, what it shows us is, as of this day, how many total assessments have been completed. And that number just keeps on adding up and up and up. As you're looking at visualizations in these different analyses, you'll notice, feel free to just click around and start exploring, because pretty much everything that's in here is interactive. So by that I mean, if I click here and I, highlight over to here and then let go, it will zoom in on specifically that time period. And I can keep on digging in and in and in. If I then double click on it, it should reset and bring me back to the overall view. I can also expand this slider window on the bottom and sort of scroll along the time period that's shown. So as I was saying, this green bar shows the cumulative number of assessments that have been completed so far. But once we get to the present day, or the most recent data that has been brought into the analysis, once we get there, we're relying on projections of how many assessments will be completed. And that's where we get to these two different dotted lines. Both of these lines are sort of, you could think about them as different potential futures. Like, these are two different things that could happen. So the teal aquamarine-ish line, the one up on top, that is the line that shows the number of assessments that would have to be completed in order to meet the goal, right? So what that actually, so if we go here, let's say, so what this tells us is that if we were going to meet our end goal by the September 30th date, then by the week of June 4th, 2017, we would have to have completed assessments on 29,867 individuals. Then, so that's the goal, that's the line that would have to be followed if we were going to meet the goal for completion of SIS assessments. The purple line down below is the line that shows us how many SIS assessments will be completed if the current trend continues. And by the current trend continues, what this is actually calculating is it's saying, all right, if we take the average number of assessments that are completed per week for the past 3 months, how many assessments, so this is just drawing out the line that shows if we keep on doing what we've been doing on average for the past 3 months, this is the direction that we'll go, and we will end up quite a bit short of the final goal. And you can see the distance if you just subtracted the to meet goal number at the end from the if trend continues number. That's really the amount of shortfall that there would be in that goal. We only look back for the past 3 months because we want that trend to start moving up and to be more sensitive to changes, so that if people really start completing more assessments, that projection starts changing more quickly to account for their more recent performance. So that's a basic overview of what this chart is showing. If you go back over to the filters, you can also see that, if you look at a particular region, different regions have been completing these at different rates, right? So if we look at Oakland, for instance, we'll note that the distance between these two is quite a bit closer, because they've been a lot sort of consistently completing these assessments throughout the duration of the project. And you can feel free to sort of click on and select multiple regions and see where the areas are where there might be the largest shortfall in completed SISs, where resources may need to be allocated, etc.